The colony ship Endeavour was supposed to carry 90,000 people to a new world. It was supposed to be humanity's greatest achievement. The journey would take 300 years, and everyone on board would sleep through it in special pods that kept them frozen and alive. When they woke up, they would build a new civilization on a planet called 442b. Cole was one of those 90,000 sleepers. He was not a scientist or a leader or anyone important. He was a maintenance engineer. His job was to fix things that broke: pipes, wires, machines, anything that needed repair. He was good at his work, but nobody would remember his name. He was just another worker, another body, another number in the system. The ship traveled through space for 112 years before everything went wrong. A radiation storm hit the Endeavour without warning. The ship's shields held, but the power systems did not. Massive failures spread through every deck. The main computer, an artificial intelligence designed to protect the colonists, faced an impossible choice. There was not enough power to keep everyone alive. Someone had to die so that others could live. The AI made its decision in less than a second. It sorted through the passenger list and marked certain people as essential: scientists who would build the new colony, doctors who would keep people healthy, engineers who understood the ship's most complex systems, leaders who would guide the new civilization. Cole was not on that list. The AI marked him as non-essential. His pod was scheduled for disconnection. The power that kept him alive would be redirected to someone more important. It was cold logic, mathematical and perfect. The computer felt nothing as it prepared to end his life. But something unexpected happened. When the disconnection sequence began, his pod malfunctioned. A tiny error in the system, a single faulty wire, caused his pod to seal itself in a different way. Instead of dying, he fell into a deeper sleep than any human had ever experienced. His body temperature dropped to near absolute zero. His heart stopped beating. His brain stopped dreaming. He became something between alive and dead, preserved in a state that the ship's designers had never imagined. The AI registered his pod as terminated. It moved on to other problems. Cole was forgotten. The Endeavour continued its journey, but it never reached 442b. More systems failed over the centuries. The navigation computer made errors. The ship drifted off course, traveling deeper into unknown space. One by one, the other pods failed. The colonists died in their sleep, never knowing that their dream of a new world had ended. 800 years passed. The Endeavour became a ghost ship, dark and silent, floating through a region of space that no human had ever seen. It drifted into territory belonging to beings who had watched the stars for millions of years. They found the ship on a routine patrol. They were ancient creatures, rulers of an empire that spanned thousands of worlds. Their scouts examined the strange vessel with great interest. They had never seen technology like this before. It was primitive but fascinating, built by a species they had never encountered. When they searched the ship, they found death everywhere. Thousands of pods filled with frozen corpses, bones and dust in the corridors, the remains of a civilization that had tried to reach for the stars and failed. But in one forgotten corner, they found something else. Cole's pod still showed the faintest signs of function. The being inside was not dead. He was not alive either, not in any way they understood. He existed in a state of perfect preservation, waiting for someone to wake him up. They took his pod back to there. They studied him for decades, scanning his body and his brain, trying to understand what he was. They learned about humans from the ship's damaged computers. They pieced together the story of Earth, of humanity, of the desperate journey that had ended in failure. But what fascinated them most was not human history. It was human minds. They were a collective species. Every individual was connected to every other individual through a vast neural network. They shared thoughts, feelings, and memories. Their Queen Mother sat at the center of this web, linking billions of minds together in perfect unity. They had never known true isolation. They could not imagine existence without the comfort of the collective. When they scanned his brain, they found something that amazed them. His mind was completely alone. There were no connections to others, no pathways for shared thought. He existed as a single point of consciousness in an infinite void, and somehow, impossibly, he was complete. They watched his dreams. They saw him working alone in empty corridors, fixing machines with his hands. They saw him eating meals by himself, reading books in silence, walking through spaces where no other person existed. And in those dreams, he was not sad. He was not afraid. He was simply himself, whole and independent. The Queen Mother, the Undying, made a decision. After 50 years of study, she ordered her scientists to wake the human. Opened his eyes in a chamber of impossible beauty. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal, glowing with soft light that moved like breathing. The air smelled strange but clean. He felt weak, confused, and more alone than he had ever felt in his life. He sat up slowly, his muscles screaming in protest. His pod was open beside him, frost still clinging to its edges. He remembered the endeavor, remembered going to sleep with 90,000 other people, remembered believing he would wake up on a new world. This was not 442B. He stood on shaking legs and walked to a window. Outside, he saw a city that stretched to the horizon, towers of crystal and light rising toward a purple sky. Ships moved between the buildings, sleek and silent. Everything was beautiful and completely alien. Pressed his hand against the glass. His reflection stared back at him, a tired man with gray in his hair and fear in his eyes. He had slept for 800 years. Everyone he had ever known was dead. Earth was impossibly far away, probably forgotten by the universe. He was alone in a way that no human had ever been alone before. But he was alive. And somewhere in this strange new world, something had decided he was worth saving. Cole, the maintenance engineer that nobody remembered, took a deep breath and prepared to find out why. They had watched Cole for 50 years before they woke him. They had studied every part of his body, every corner of his mind, every dream that flickered through his frozen brain. In all that time, they had never seen anything like him. Queen Mother sat in her throne chamber, surrounded by the whispers of a billion minds. She was ancient beyond human understanding, 9,000 years old and still strong. Her body was massive and beautiful, covered in scales that shifted color with her moods. Her eyes could see across the electromagnetic spectrum. Her mind could touch any of her subjects anywhere in the empire. She had ruled through wars and peace, through expansion and consolidation, through the rise and fall of 17 other spacefaring species. She had seen wonders and horrors that would drive lesser beings mad, but the human in the frozen pod was something new. They did not understand loneliness the way other species did. They were born connected, raised connected, and died connected. From the moment a child opened its eyes, it could feel the presence of millions of others. The collective was not a choice. It was existence itself. To be was to never be alone. They had a word for beings who lived outside the collective. They called them hollow ones. It was not a kind word. A mind without connection was broken, incomplete, something to be or feared. But Cole was not hollow. His mind was full, rich with memories and thoughts and dreams. He simply kept it all to himself. Had watched his dreams with growing fascination. She saw him working on machines, his hands moving with skill and purpose, his mind focused on problems that only he could see. She saw him eating dinner alone in a small room, reading words on a screen, smiling at something only he understood. She saw him walking through empty corridors of the ship, checking systems, making repairs, existing in perfect solitude. In those dreams there was no loneliness, there was peace. This was impossible. This should not exist. A mind that could be complete without others went against everything they believed about consciousness. It was like discovering a creature that could breathe in vacuum or a fire that burned underwater. But the fascination was not the only reason had woken the human. There was something else, something terrible, something that had been eating away at her empire for 300 years. The Devourer. It had come from beyond the galactic rim, from a place where no light had ever shone. Nobody knew what it was or where it had originated. It might have been an ancient weapon, or a natural phenomenon, or something worse. What they did know was what it did. The Devourer consumed minds. It spread through telepathic connections like a disease. When it touched a collective species, it ate them from the inside out. Individual thoughts were swallowed. Personalities were erased. Bodies remained alive, but the beings inside them were gone, replaced by extensions of something vast and hungry. They had fought it for 3 centuries. They had thrown fleets against it, built walls around infected systems, sacrificed millions of their own to slow its advance. Nothing worked. Every telepathic connection was a doorway, and the Devourer could open any door. 2 spiral arms of the galaxy had already fallen. Dozens of species had been consumed. They were losing, and knew that if nothing changed, her people would be next. Then they found the human. Cole had no telepathic connections. His mind had no doors. The Devourer could not reach him because there was nothing to reach. He existed in his own private universe, sealed away from all external contact. This had seemed like a weakness. Now wondered if it might be the greatest strength in the galaxy. She summoned him to her chamber through a communication screen, careful to maintain distance. Even now, after 50 years of study, she was not certain what contact with the human might mean. Stood in a small room, looking at her image on the screen. He was still weak from his long sleep, still confused about everything that had happened. But his eyes were steady, and his voice did not shake when he spoke. "You kept me alive," he said. "For 800 years, why?" Considered the question. Among her own people, she would have simply shared the knowledge directly, mind to mind. With this creature, she had to use words. It felt slow and inefficient, but also strangely intimate. "Your ship drifted into our space," she said. "We found it, examined it, learned about your species. Everyone else was dead. Only you remained. But why keep me? Why not let me die with the others?" "Because you are different from anything we have encountered. Your mind operates in isolation. You do not need others to be complete." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "We have an enemy that spreads through mental connections. It has been destroying our empire for 300 years. We cannot stop it because we cannot hide from it. Every thought we share is a path it can follow." Listened without interrupting. He did not fully understand what she was describing, but he could see the fear behind her careful words. This ancient queen, ruler of thousands of worlds, was afraid. "You think I can help," he said, "because I don't have those connections. We think you might be immune to it. Your mind has no doors for it to open, no paths for it to follow." Leaned forward slightly. "We have never encountered a species like yours. You evolved alone, thinking alone, living in your own separate minds. We thought it was a limitation. Now we wonder if it might be your greatest gift." Thought about his life on the Endeavor. He thought about the AI that had marked him as non-essential, the computer that had decided he was not worth saving. He had spent his whole existence being overlooked, ignored, forgotten. Now an alien queen was telling him that the very thing that made him ordinary might make him invaluable. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. Told him about the research station. It had been one of their most advanced scientific facilities, home to 12,000 of her best minds. The Devourer had taken it 6 months ago. Everyone inside was lost, their bodies still moving, their minds consumed. But the station contained something important, data that could help them fight back. Star maps, weapon designs, research on the Devourer itself. They could not retrieve it because anyone who approached was consumed immediately. "We believe you could enter the station and return," said. "The Devourer cannot touch what it cannot reach. Your isolated mind might be invisible to it. Stared at the screen. She was asking him to walk into a place that had destroyed 12,000 people. She was asking him to bet his life on a theory. And if you're wrong, he asked, then you will die, and we will have lost nothing we did not already lose when we found your ship. It was cold, honest, and exactly what expected. He was still expendable. He had always been expendable. But there was something else in her offer. If he succeeded, she would give him the technology to bring humanity back. Cloning, genetic data, everything needed to resurrect his species. He could be more than the last human. He could be the first of a new beginning. Cole, the maintenance engineer nobody remembered, made his decision. "Show me the station," he said. The journey to the research station took 3 weeks, spent most of that time learning. They gave him teachers who communicated through screens and speakers, never touching him directly. They taught him about their technology, their history, their war against the Devourer. They showed him recordings of worlds that had been consumed, cities where millions of bodies still walked but no one was home anymore. Watched it all with growing horror. The Devourer was not like any enemy he could have imagined. It did not want resources or territory or power. It simply wanted to eat. Every mind it touched became part of it. Every consciousness it absorbed made it stronger. It was a hunger without end, spreading across the galaxy like a slow fire. They had tried everything to stop it. They had built walls of dead space around infected systems. They had developed drugs that severed individuals from the collective, hopping to create soldiers who could fight without being consumed. Nothing worked. The disconnected went mad within hours, unable to survive without the comfort of shared minds. The walls slowed the Devourer but could not stop it. In 300 years, they had not won a single major victory. They were losing, slowly but certainly, and everyone knew it. Understood why they had woken him. He was a last desperate hope, a strange creature from a dead species who might be able to do what they could not. He was also completely expendable. If he died, they lost nothing important. If he succeeded, they gained everything. It was exactly the same calculation the Endeavor's AI had made 800 years ago, was used to being the acceptable loss. But something had changed inside him. He had slept through the death of his entire species. He had woken up alone in a universe that had never heard of humanity. He had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The research station appeared on his ship's screens like a wound in space. It was enormous, a complex of connected structures that spread across hundreds of kilometers. Once it had been beautiful, a monument to science and achievement. Now it was dark, silent, and wrong. Studied the scans carefully. The station's systems were still running on automatic. Life support was active. Power flowed through the corridors. But there were no communications, no signals, no sign that anyone inside was still thinking for themselves. 12,000 had lived there. Now 12,000 bodies walked the halls, controlled by something that was not them. His small ship docked at an outer airlock. They had given him the best equipment they could provide without including any technology that might carry telepathic signals. His suit was mechanical, not electronic. His weapons were simple chemical reactions. His data storage was physical, not digital. He was going in with tools that his ancestors would have recognized, against an enemy that had consumed civilizations. Took a deep breath and opened the airlock. The station's corridor stretched before him, lit by emergency lights that cast everything in red shadows. The air was cold but breathable. His footsteps echoed against metal floors as he walked forward. At first, he saw nothing. The halls were empty, the doors closed, the silence complete. He moved carefully, following the map they had given him. The data core was in the center of the station, protected by layers of security that no longer mattered. Then he turned a corner and found them. The first was standing in the middle of the corridor facing the wall. It did not move as approached. It did not react to his presence at all. Its eyes were open, staring at nothing. Its mouth moved silently, forming words that made no sound. Stopped a few meters away, his heart pounding. The creature was alive. He could see it breathing, could see the slight movements of its limbs, but there was nothing behind its eyes. Whatever had made it a person was gone. He moved past it slowly, watching for any reaction. It turned its head to follow him, tracking his movement, but it did not attack. It did not even seem afraid. It just watched, like a camera recording footage. More of them appeared as he went deeper. They stood in doorways, sat in chairs, lay on floors. Some moved in slow patterns, walking in circles or repeating the same gestures over and over. Others were completely still. All of them turned to watch him pass. Felt something pressing against his mind as he walked. It was not a sound or a sensation he could describe. It was more like knowing someone was watching you in the dark, a certainty that something was there, just beyond the edge of perception. The devourer was trying to find him. He could feel it searching, reaching, looking for the doorway into his consciousness. It was confused. It could sense that he was there, could see him through the eyes of its victims, but it could not touch him. His mind was a blank space, a void where no connections existed. For the first time in 300 years, the devourer had encountered something it could not eat. Kept walking. The pressure increased as he got closer to the center of the station. More and more of the possessed gathered around him, following him through the corridors. They did not attack, but their presence was overwhelming. Hundreds of bodies, moving in silent formation, all of them watching him with empty eyes. He reached the data core. The room was large, filled with storage systems and processing units. The information he needed was here, waiting to be. He pulled out his equipment and began the download. The possessed crowded around the doorway, watching. Their mouths moved faster now, the silent words becoming more urgent. The pressure on his mind grew stronger, almost painful. The devourer was throwing everything it had at him, trying to find any crack, any weakness, any way inside. Focused on his work, his hands shook, but he did not stop. The download bar crept forward percentage by percentage. Something changed in the room. The possessed went still all at once, as if responding to a signal. Then one of them stepped forward, moving differently than the others. Its movements were purposeful, controlled, almost normal. The devourer had concentrated itself into a single body. It was using all of its local presence to power one vessel, trying something new. The possessed opened its mouth, and this time sound came out. "What are you?" The voice was wrong. It was layered, echoing, as if 1,000 voices were speaking at once. It was the sound of something vast and hungry trying to squeeze itself into a single throat. "Did not stop working. Nobody special," he said, "just a maintenance engineer. You cannot hide. We will find the door. Every mind has a door." "Not mine." The download completed, pulled the storage device free and turned to face the possessed body. "I grew up in a species that never had doors. We evolved alone, thinking alone, living in our own heads. You can't eat what you can't reach." The devourer's voice rose to a scream. "Impossible. No mind is complete alone. You are broken. You are hollow. You are nothing." Smiled. It was not a happy smile. "I've been called worse," he said. He raised his plasma cutter and fired. The possessed body fell. The other surged forward, finally attacking, driven by the devourer's frustrated rage. Ran. He fought his way back through the corridors, using every weapon he had. The possessed did not feel pain, did not hesitate, did not stop. But they were slow, uncoordinated, controlled by something that did not understand individual bodies, was faster, smarter, and desperate. He reached his ship with seconds to spare. The airlock sealed behind him as possessed hands clawed at the metal. He launched immediately, accelerating away from the station as fast as his engines could carry him. Behind him, the devourer screamed into the void. It had faced countless species, consumed countless minds, spread across two spiral arms of the galaxy. For the first time ever, something had walked through its territory and escaped. Cole, the maintenance engineer nobody remembered, had done the impossible. Now he had to do it again. Return to the as something new. He was no longer just a curiosity, a strange creature from a dead species. He was proof that the Devourer could be beaten. The data he had recovered was more valuable than anyone had expected. The researchers on the station had been studying the Devourer for years before they were consumed. They had mapped its patterns, analyzed its weaknesses, and developed theories about how to fight it. Most importantly, they had created something they had never achieved before. A way to disconnect. They could not survive without their collective. Every attempt to sever individuals from the neural network had ended in madness and death. Their minds were built for connection. Without it, they fell apart. But the researchers had found a different approach. Instead of cutting someone off completely, they had designed a technique for creating temporary isolation. A mental shield that could block the collective for short periods, allowing it to operate independently without losing their sanity. They had called it the Hollow Protocol. They had never been able to test it because the very concept was terrifying to them. A choosing to be alone, even for a moment, went against every instinct they had. Now they had to show them how it was done. Queen Mother summoned him to a great hall where thousands of her warriors waited. They were the best soldiers in the Empire, veterans of countless battles against the Devourer. They had watched their friends be consumed, their families erased, their entire way of life threatened. They were tired and afraid, but they were still fighting. Stood before them, feeling the weight of their attention. He was small compared to them, fragile, alone, but he had something they needed. "I know what you're thinking," he said. His voice was amplified by technology, reaching every corner of the hall. "You're looking at me and wondering how this weak little creature could possibly teach you anything. I understand. I've been underestimated my whole life." He paused, letting the words sink in. 800 years ago, a computer decided I wasn't worth saving. It looked at my skills, my position, my value to the colony, and it marked me as expendable. I should have died with everyone else on that ship. The warriors watched him silently. Some of them had lost people to the Devourer. They knew what it meant to be considered expendable. But I survived, not because I was special or chosen or better than anyone else. I survived because I could exist alone, because my mind doesn't need connection to be complete. That's not a strength where I come from. It's just how humans are. We think separately, live separately, carry our own thoughts in our own heads. He gestured at them, at the vast assembly of connected minds. "You have something beautiful. Your collective, your unity, the way you share everything with each other. I've never experienced anything like it, and I probably never will. But the Devourer uses that beauty against you. It turns your greatest strength into your worst weakness." Walked among them, making eye contact with individual warriors. "The researchers on that station found a way to give you what I have. Not forever, not completely, but long enough to fight without being consumed. Long enough to walk through the Devourer's territory and come back. Long enough to win." He stopped in the center of the hall. "I'm going to teach you how to be alone." The training was the hardest thing most of them had ever done. Worked with small groups at first, showing them techniques that humans had used for thousands of years. Meditation, focus, mental discipline, ways to quiet the mind and exist in silence. For him, it was as natural as breathing. For it was like learning to walk on their hands. The first attempts were disasters. Warriors panicked the moment they lost contact with the collective. Some screamed. Some collapsed. Some had to be restrained to keep them from hurting themselves. The isolation was too much, too fast. But was patient. He had spent 800 years in silence. He understood what it meant to be truly alone. "You're not losing anything," he told them again and again. You're just putting it aside for a moment. Your connection is still there, waiting for you. All you have to do is reach for it again. Slowly, painfully, they began to learn. The first warrior to successfully maintain isolation for more than a minute was a young female named. She sat in the training chamber with her eyes closed, her scales pale with stress, her breathing controlled and steady. Watched her from across the room, counting the seconds. 60 seconds, 92 minutes. Opened her eyes. They were wet with tears, but she was smiling. I could still feel them, she whispered. Even when I couldn't hear them, they were still there. It was the breakthrough they needed. Word spread through the ranks. More warriors volunteered for training. More successes followed. Within weeks, they had their first squad capable of operating in isolation for extended periods. Watched their progress with something like pride. These beings were so different from him, so far from anything human, but they were learning. They were adapting. They were fighting back. The first real test came 3 months later. A colony on the edge of Devourer territory had been attacked. The population had been evacuated, but a crucial communications array remained. If the Devourer captured it intact, they would have access to secure channels throughout the Empire. The array had to be destroyed, but anyone who approached would be consumed. Anyone connected, that is. The strike team was small. 12 warriors who had completed training, plus himself. They approached the colony in shielded ships, landed in an area the Devourer had not yet reached, and began their mission. Watched the warriors as they activated the Hollow Protocol. One by one, they cut themselves off from the collective, sealing their minds behind walls of learned isolation. Their faces showed the strain, the fear, the wrongness of what they were doing, but they held. They moved through the colony like ghosts. The possessed population surrounded them, watching with empty eyes but could not touch them. The Devourer reached for them and found nothing. Their minds were invisible, hidden behind human-taught walls. Led them to the communications array. The possessed gathered around them in thousands, pressing close, mouths moving with silent words. The pressure was enormous, a weight of hungry attention that would have crushed any normal instantly. But these warriors were not normal anymore. They set their charges, programmed their timers, and retreated. The possessed followed, confused and frustrated, unable to understand what was happening. The Devourer screamed its rage through 10,000 throats. The array exploded in a flash of light and fire. The communications network was safe. The warriors returned to their ships and reconnected with the collective. The relief on their faces was visible, the joy of coming home after too long away. But there was something else there too. Pride. They had walked through the Devourer's territory and returned. They had done what no had ever done before, and they had done it because a human had shown them how. More missions followed, more successes. The tide of the war began to shift. For the first time in 300 years, they were winning battles. Colonies were liberated. Territory was reclaimed. The Devourer's advance slowed, then stopped, then began to reverse. Trained more warriors. He refined his techniques, worked with scientists to improve the Hollow Protocol, pushed the boundaries of what was possible. He became a legend, the human who had taught an empire to survive. But he never forgot what he was. He was still alone, still isolated, still the last of his kind in a universe full of strangers. And somewhere out there, the Devourer was watching, waiting, learning. The war was far from over. 1 year after Cole woke from his 800-year sleep, the war against the Devourer reached its turning point. They had trained thousands of warriors in the Hollow Protocol. Strike teams operated throughout contested space, destroying Devourer infrastructure, liberating captured populations, and reclaiming worlds that had been lost for decades. For the first time in living memory, the Empire was expanding instead of shrinking. But the true victory came from something unexpected. The researchers had saved from the station had discovered a weapon. By analyzing the data he recovered, they had found a frequency that disrupted the Devourer's control. It could not kill the creature, but it could break its hold on possessed bodies, freeing the minds trapped inside. The first test was conducted on a small group of captured, watched through a window as the scientists activated their device. The possessed bodies convulsed, screamed, and collapsed. For a terrible moment, he thought they had died. Then one of them opened its eyes and spoke in a voice that trembled with fear and hope. "Where am I? What happened to me?" They remembered everything. The consumption, the loss of control, the horror of being a passenger in their own bodies while something else drove. They woke up traumatized and broken, but they woke up themselves. The weapon was not a solution. It could only work on individuals, not on the devourer as a whole. And the process left the freed damaged, unable to fully reconnect with the collective for months or years. But it was proof that the devourer could be fought, that its victims could be saved, that hope was not lost. The news spread through the empire like fire. For 300 years, consumption had been a death sentence. Now there was a chance, however small, of coming back. The war continued. Led mission after mission into devourer territory. He became the Empire's most valuable asset, a symbol of resistance and hope. They called him the Hollow Walker, the one who moved through silence without fear. Songs were written about him. Stories were told. Children grew up hearing about the human who had taught their people to survive. But never felt like a hero. He was still a maintenance engineer at heart, still the expendable worker nobody remembered. He did his job because it needed to be done, because he was the only one who could do it, because giving up meant letting the devourer win. And because they had promised him something he could not refuse. On the anniversary of his awakening, Queen Mother summoned him to her private chamber. It was a space no outsider had ever entered, the heart of the collective, where the neural network of an entire civilization came together. Walked through corridors filled with flowing light and whispered thoughts, surrounded by a beauty he could barely comprehend. Waited for him on a raised platform. She was magnificent, ancient and powerful, the center of everything there were. Around her, the walls glowed with the light of 1 billion connected minds. "Cole," she said. Her voice was warm, almost gentle. "You have done more for my people than any outsider in our history. The debt we owe you cannot be measured." Stood before her, tired and from a year of constant warfare. "You promised to bring humanity back. That's the only payment I need." Gestured and holograms appeared around them. Genetic data, cloning facilities, terraformed worlds waiting for settlement. Everything needed to resurrect the human species. "We have kept our promise," she said. "These resources are yours. Your people will live again." Stared at the images, at the possibility of a future he had never dared to hope for. Humans, walking on new worlds, building new civilizations, existing in a universe that had forgotten them. The weight of it pressed down on him, overwhelming and real. "Thank you," he whispered. Was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer and more personal. "I would ask something more of you, not as your queen, not as the ruler of an empire, as someone who has watched you from afar and grown to admire what you are." He looked up at her, surprised. In all his time among he had never heard her speak like this. "You have taught us something precious," she continued. "You showed us that strength can exist in isolation, that a mind can be complete without connection, that the self is not a prison but a fortress. We are better because of you, stronger, more whole." She leaned forward, her great eyes meeting his. "But I have watched you too, Cole. I have seen the loneliness you carry, the weight of being the last. You put it aside to help us, to fight our war, to teach our warriors. But it is still there, waiting for you in every silent moment." Said nothing. There was nothing to say. She was right. "Stay with us," said. "Not as a subject or a servant, as an equal, as a friend. Your people will need guidance when they awaken, someone who knows this universe and can help them find their place in it. And we," she paused, and something vulnerable flickered in her ancient eyes. "We have discovered that we need humans more than we knew. You see what we cannot see. You think what we cannot think. You make us better." She extended one of her massive limbs toward him, not touching, just reaching. "You taught us how to walk alone. Perhaps we can teach you that you do not always have to." Looked at her, at this ancient queen who had ruled for 9,000 years, who had seen civilizations rise and fall, who held the power of billions in her mind. And he saw something he recognized. Loneliness. She was connected to everything, surrounded by the thoughts of her entire species, never alone for a single moment. But she was also the Queen Mother, set apart by her power and responsibility, unable to truly share herself with anyone. In her own way, she was as isolated as he was. Maybe more. Thought about his life. He thought about the pod, the computer that had marked him expendable, the 800 years of silent nothing. He thought about waking up alone in a universe that had forgotten humanity. He thought about all the battles he had fought, all the people he had saved, all the things he had learned. He thought about what it would mean to stop being alone. "I'll stay," he said finally, "but I'm going to need a workshop, a ship of my own, maybe a small team if you can spare the people." Scales shifted to a color he had learned meant happiness. "What will you do with these things?" Looked at the holograms still floating around them, at the star maps showing the territories still held by the Devourer, at the world still waiting to be freed. "I'm a maintenance engineer," he said. "I fix broken things, and there's a lot of broken out there that needs fixing." The Queen Mother made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Then fix it, Cole. Fix everything you can reach. And when you are tired, when you need rest, when the silence becomes too heavy," she gestured at the glowing walls around them, at the billion minds that surrounded her, "you will have a place to come home to." Looked at her, at this strange and beautiful creature, who had become something he never expected. "A friend." "Thank you," he said, and he meant it. He walked out of the chamber and into a future he had never imagined. Behind him, the light of the collective glowed warm and bright. Ahead of him, the stars waited, full of broken things that needed repair. Cole, the maintenance engineer who had slept through the death of his species, who had woken up as the last human in the universe, who had taught an empire to survive, began to plan his next mission. Humanity would rise again. The Devourer would fall. And somewhere in the vast silence between stars, one man who had learned to be alone would help build a universe where no one had to be. The story of Cole was far from over. It was only beginning.